Hey everybody, welcome back. And today I am going to be recording a special episode in memory of and to talk about the events that happened 15 years ago, coming up this Sunday on June 28, 2005. And that was 15 years ago. You heard me talk about it before, of when we lost one of our aircraft, call sign Turbine 33 in Afghanistan. And we also lost, on that day, we lost 8 Night Stalkers and 8 Navy SEALs on the aircraft, as well as there were a team of 4 Navy SEALs on the ground, 3 of which were killed, and there was 1 survivor, of which the movie Lone Survivor came from. So with me, as always, Quinn, producer.
Hey.
Thanks for having me in today, sort of short notice, but this is something, one of these special episodes that I wanted to do to talk just a little bit about this. And again, just to have a little bit more of the story out there. And because, again, we are 15 years now past this event and past this tragedy, but it's part of our history. It's part of the nation's history. It's part of the history of these individuals that were killed, of the survivors, of the family and friends that were affected. And I think it's really important for these stories to be told, not for glory, but just so we don't forget. That's one of the things that we talked about. But 15 years ago is when this happened, and again, I've talked about this, and how it's affected me personally a little bit, and I've had other people on the show too, who've been able to share a little bit about how that's affected them, or even similar circumstances. But we talk about dates and how these dates are ingrained in upon us, and we look at the calendar, and it's like it's highlighted. That even if it's not highlighted, it's imprinted so hard in our brains that we want to make sure in some way or another that we pay tribute. I've got a really incredible piece of history I'm going to share with everybody today, but just sort of to frame the events of what happened. So on June 27th, there was a team of 4 Navy SEALs that Marcus Luttrell was part of. He's the guy that survived, the lone survivor, Navy SEAL, and they were on Operation Red Wings. And their mission was to go in to be infilled by helicopter and to set up basically a surveillance and reconnaissance position to check out 1 or 2 villages, but basically they're looking for some bad guys, terrorists, whether they were Al Qaeda supporters or other networks, but they were trying to look for this one guy that was sort of in charge of this bigger area. And so they were put in, and as the sun came up, again, people can, they've seen the movie, they've read the book, heard the stories that, things just went from bad to worse as they got compromised by locals. And it was sometime during that, basically this running gun battle these 4 individuals have, that the team leader, Michael Murphy, he was able to get basically a rescue call or a call for help out. I think he used, if I remember right, he used a satellite phone, like an Iridium, to make a call back to the operations center and a request for help. And that was sometime, again, the sun was already up at that point. They'd only been on the ground for just a short amount of time and again, I didn't research the exact events of these things. I'm going a lot off memory right now, but, and so that basically triggered a series of events back at Bagram Air Base. You had the operations center that was overseeing all the ground forces, the Navy SEALs, the Green Berets, and, they contacted our operations center, for our unit, and, and said, hey, these guys are in trouble. We want to send in a quick reaction force, to basically reinforcements, to rescue them, to bring more guns to the gun battle. And so immediately they went into our operations woke up our crews. Our crews were all pretty much when we deployed, we're always operating at night. So we get up when the sun sets, and then we go to bed sunrise, and that's sort of our cycle. And so, they've probably only been asleep for a few hours.
Yeah.
And, everybody's just like, hey, get up, get to the birds. They're in trouble. And, without hesitation, every single one of them did that. And that was something that we had always trained for. And in fact, we talked about, and we would reinforce to our customers, to the men that we were serving, the ones that we were putting in, that, hey, if anything ever went wrong, we will come get you.
Yeah.
We're going to be there. We will fly through the gates of hell if necessary. And because we wanted them to have that confidence. So that way they knew that was one less thing for them to worry about.
Yeah.
And so, and again, there was I guarantee for the pilots and the crew members, the doc, everybody who was going to the aircraft, nobody was going, is this a good idea?
Yeah.
That's just not, there's just no time, because it literally, and I don't remember how long it took for them to launch, but we would train to do that within an hour from being notified to taking off. And so, and they also had they had some Navy SEALs that were not on the mission that got on the aircraft as well, because those are going to be the ones. And so these 2 aircraft took off and they flew to that area. And then finally, they ended up stopping sort of probably about 30 minutes away at another forward operating base, and to sort of reassess the situation. There might have been a shuffling of the Navy SEALs in the back of the aircraft, depending upon weight, temperatures, fuel, that type of thing. And then they took off from there for the final push into the objective. And it was when the first aircraft was coming in short final, and they were going to go into basically a high hover over just a little hole in the trees. And these trees were massive. We're talking 75, 100 feet tall. And drop these ropes out the back and let the guys slide down the ropes for 120 feet, which in of itself is not normal.
Yeah.
Normally they would, we would train to do, they're called fast rope operations, and we would train to do that at, one as low as possible, because, just from a risk perspective, the longer this guy is sliding down a rope and he's not tied in, it's just his hands and his feet. Obviously, the more chance of slipping, falling, so we'd always try and get as low as we can, 20, 30 feet. We might train at 40 feet. But obviously at this point, and this is, the same thing, the guys that went in, the team, the 4 Navy SEALs who went in the night before, same thing. It was a long rope for them to go in. And so this aircraft was coming in to do that. And as they were beginning to decelerate and come in, is when somebody popped up out of a bunker, concealed position, somewhere close to the landing zone with an RPG, and shot the RPG, which ultimately, from best as, from the investigation and eyewitness reports from the second aircraft, is it severed the drive shaft. And in a Chinook, that's not good, because the drive shaft is what keeps the rotor blades in sync.
Wow.
And at that point, if they're not in sync, it's just, it's the only aircraft that can have a midair with itself. And so from that point, the aircraft crashed. And, it took a while for people, ultimately, because confusion reigns at that point, just in any battlefield situation, but there was just mass confusion. And for a while, the status of everybody was not known.
Wow.
Because one, I think it took, if I remember, again, trying to get my timeline correct in my head, they were not able to get in more rescue forces. They tried again that evening, but the weather got bad. And so it was actually another period of darkness day. So it was a little bit of time. So they weren't 100% sure if there were any survivors yet at all.
Wow.
But the Army also has a process when things like that happen, depending upon what information is available and when families are notified and that type of thing. And, at some point between that event on June 28th and probably, and again, just trying to get my things correct, around July 1st or 2nd, families were notified, but not to the point that, hey, they were killed in action. It was more of a, hey, We know your family member got on this aircraft. We know this aircraft crashed. We just don't know what their status is yet.
Yeah.
Which, again, it can obviously be, I can only imagine what it would be like for a family.
Oh, yeah.
And, I was over there at that time. I actually got on the ground the evening of June 29th. And that was the same evening that the rescue forces were able to get infilled, and I met the crews when they came back and began flying the next night. Again, I've told that story before. And it was hard, as anybody can imagine. Anybody that has been in this situation, it's not, when your friends are in trouble, you want to do as much as you can to help them.
Yeah.
Guys that you love, whether you knew them or not, because they were soldiers, they were warriors,
Yeah.
and so you're going to do that. And so as we're going through that, one of the unexpected things that we received was a letter while we were over there. And one of the spouses, Lori, the wife of the widow at that point now of Corey Goodnature, for whatever reason, she decided to write a letter to us, which I don't know how she did it. I don't know where she found the strength. Well, I think I do know. But she sent a letter, and what she did is, because she was surrounded by a lot of other people at that point, from people who were in the unit back here as well as family members. But she wrote this letter, and she had it sent to us, and I think they scanned it in and then emailed it to us over there. And very shortly after she wrote it, we all had copies of the letter. And I just want to read what this letter says. And I talked to Lori about a month ago, and I was, it's been on my heart to share this letter for a couple of reasons, but at the same time, and again, I've talked about this before, I never want to bring shame or dishonor to guys that have died or to these families that have had to pay the ultimate sacrifice, by losing their loved ones.
And this is, he is the pilot of
Yes.
the one that was shot down,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He was the pilot in command, the flight lead of the aircraft that was shot down. So he was, the best of the best. I mean, he was, in charge of all of the planning and execution. An incredible pilot. And so his wife, she writes this letter to us, and so I talked to Lori about a month ago, and I said, hey, here's what I'm asking permission of, because I talked to a few other of my fellow Night Stalkers, guys that have retired and people that were involved with this. And I said, hey, what do you think about this idea? Because I want to share this because it's a piece of history.
Oh.
And it shows incredible strength in a time of incredible sadness and grief and fear and anxiety. But she was able to pull this off. And it brought strength to us.
Yeah.
And it's important for now, 15 years later, for people to hear this. Because this is what, heroes come from.
Yeah.
And I think at any time right now, in our nation, we need heroes.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And so Lori, she agreed. She, once I explained it to her, and she said, yeah, it'd be, she gave permission for me to be able to share this letter with everybody. Because to my knowledge, I don't think it has been shared before, And so, to my Night Stalker brothers, I just say, and again, I'm sharing this to honor my brothers, to honor the guys that have been killed, to honor the families, to honor us, the ones that have done it and the ones that are still doing it. So she wrote this letter, dated July 1st, 2005, at 8:34 p.m. And here's the letter. Hi, guys. I've always been proud to be a Night Stalker wife. I've always thought you guys were cut from the same mold. Your dedication to this country and your mission has always amazed me. I hear that Corey went down as a hero. That's no surprise. He's been my hero the past 6 years. I've been so proud to be his wife. I know for a fact that he found it a privilege to serve with each of you. As you continue in your efforts, please know that I am very, very proud of you. please remember what Corey would want to do, and that is to get the mission done. That is the best way to honor his memory. He left us quite a legacy, and I'm praying for you. Lady Night Stalkers don't quit. Love, Lori. P.S. Your wives are an amazing support to me. They've been awesome. And P.S.S. Roger, keep your chin up. And so as we got that letter, this became our strength during that time, because it was for about the next, from when we received this letter, about another, I think it was 9 or 10 days that operation continued, from bringing out the remains. At that point, you basically, the enemy had punched us in the nose, and we were going to make sure that, something, they were going to be sorry for that. And so we were constantly bringing in more Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, U.S. Marines. And plus, at this point, there was still at least one person unaccounted for, Marcus Luttrell. We didn't know where he was at this point. I can't remember if they'd already found the other 3 Navy SEALs that were with him, their remains. So we were still in this ongoing mission, and there was grief, there was anger. We had a memorial service, and again, it's what do you do with all this?
Wow.
And so we get this letter, and copies were passed out to everybody. And, what do you say to this? Because it's strength. It's, here she is, probably pretty sure she knows. I mean, she says that, she heard that Corey went down as a hero. So, and again, I can't remember the notification sequence, and she's writing this to us. That's her thought, is not this inward focus of this grief. And I'm sure that was there, right?
Yeah.
How could it not be?
Yeah.
But her focus was like, what can I do to help these other people that are also suffering right now?
Yeah.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And she would talk about, her faith, in Jesus. And that's where a lot of this came from, without a doubt. And so it's such an honor to be able to not only know Corey and all the guys in the aircraft, but her strength. And I know that strength has been, this story, I'm sure, maybe not this exact story, but this story, I'm sure, has been, or it's happened similarly in other situations, to where these spouses are able to find this something inside that's just deep down. And so, so for the next, basically 3-4 months for me, and a lot of guys did this, because as I asked people over the past month, I've seen similar pictures, but they would take their letters, and we just folded them up and stuck them in our pockets.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, July in Afghanistan, it gets pretty hot.
Yeah.
And so as we had this thing folded up, it became, you can see the sweat stains on here. You can see, and I'll put a picture up as well so people can see it. But, it's tattered, it's worn. I've taped it up now just so it doesn't completely fall apart. But, we just took it and stuck it in our pocket. And it became a source of strength. It was there with me with my ID card. When I walked out the door to go fly a mission, this was going to be with me as well. Yeah. And again, it provided huge strength to us.
Yeah.
And thankful that, that we can have this. And, and so as we talk today and as, I just wanted to come today and to share this story to show that, not only are the heroes the guys that got killed, but, the family members and the incredible strength. And even in the worst of times, whether, it can seem like the whole world is against you, you can still find strength. There's still something there. And maybe it's not going to come directly from internal from you, but there can be somebody around you that can help. But for Lori to know how much this meant to so many of us, because this letter was not only, it was shown to Navy SEALs, it was shown to Army Rangers, it was passed, the staff, everybody took such incredible strength in this. you know. And so as we, you know, and again, I just pray, you know, as people hear this episode on June 28th, this weekend, this Sunday, you know, just to take a few minutes to remember, you know, the 8 Night Stalkers, the 8 Navy SEALs that were on board the aircraft, call sign Turbine 33, and then also the 3 Navy SEALs who were part of Operation Red Wings on the ground who died, and then also Marcus Luttrell, who was the lone survivor.
Oh. This story, I don't think I've ever told you this before, but this particular story has a significance in my story a little bit. So whenever I saw this movie, I just flown to LA to go to a rehab that you know, I had to go to. I had 1 semester of school left.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like an 8-month-long program type thing. And I had, you know, it was me and my dad maybe 2 days before I had to actually be there. And so we were in LA it was a night, maybe 2 nights or something like that. But while we were there, we watched this movie. We watched Lone Survivor. And at the end credits, whenever they show all the pictures of the families, man, I mean, it's the hardest I've cried as an adult.
Yeah.
Like, seriously. I mean, it just... and it was the first time that I had ever genuinely become disgusted with myself. You know, that you guys were fighting there, and what I was doing with the freedom that you were fighting for was, you know, doing heroin for the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so this story, you know, it was a huge motivation for me at that time. It was.
Wow.
It really was.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
For sure.
Hope everybody was able to take something away from this, just like what Quinn was saying. After we had recovered all the remains off the mountain and they were processed by mortuary affairs and ready to go back, the military does, if at all possible, they call it a rampside ceremony. And that's when the remains are loaded onto an aircraft to be flown back to the United States. There's some preparation that goes into that, just so we can honor the fallen and make sure that their remains are handled with dignity and respect and the honor they deserve. I think our first sergeant got one of the transfer cases that he used, which the military has. They're basically metal coffins, if you will, but they call them a transfer case, and that's where the remains are placed inside, and then they drape the flag over it for being flown back to the United States. But we were going to be carrying, you know, the remains on board, and you have this incredible weight that's placed upon you, and you're going to begin, you know, that evening later on, you're going to be carrying, you know, your best friends. And, you know, the day before this actual ceremony took place, though, we were standing outside. I think, God, I can't remember, we'd just gotten up, and you begin to hear these bagpipes playing, and it was taps. You know, that's the song that gets played, you know, through a bugler, or in this case, it was going to be bagpipes. But we could hear it. You know, it was somewhere in our compound, and we eventually saw the guy. You know, I think he was a Navy SEAL just by the way he looked. Big, huge beard, muscles, and, you know. But we were joking. We were like, why did this guy just happen to have, you know, like there just happened to be a guy that plays bagpipes, you know, over here right now, and he was practicing taps, and even then, though, the chills were already just starting to, you know, would run up your spine, just, you know, and your hair would stand up, and the tears would start to form. But he was prepping for that, and so that evening, once we finally did the ceremony, you know, and I think, you know, Bagram Air Base at that point, there was thousands of people living on that air base, and thousands of people came out for that ceremony. They placed the remains in the back of these Humvees, and the Humvees drove from mortuary affairs out to the flight line, and there were people lined up along the street and through the various ways that the Humvees would drive out to the planes. And then we retrieved the remains off the Humvees and carried them on to the Air Force C-17, and you could hear this bagpipe player playing taps. And so as we finish out, you know, this episode, we're going to finish out with that.